There's a lot. I think Malik Willis would be great with the Steelers, who haven't had a lot of athleticism, and they haven't been terribly dynamic at quarterback. I do think that Aaron Rodgers made them more adult. They cut back on the mistakes. Aaron knows how to play the position. They felt professional offensively, despite having a very limited receiving core, especially when DK Metcalf got bounced for a couple games. I think Malik Willis, the Green Bay connection, Mike McCarthy. I do think it's interesting in Pittsburgh that Mike McCarthy has already built his staff. One of those people on the staff did not necessarily get along with Aaron Rodgers, and I also think McCarthy would never say it publicly, but everybody in this league always gets held hostage by Aaron because he disappears in the postseason. And Mike McCarthy or Albert Breer or anybody, if you took over a new business, you want to get your help in, and nobody wants to sit around waiting for Aaron Rodgers. So my take is the one team that could go get Aaron and say, well, we've got a quarterback, a young one, is Minnesota. And so they're like, we're going to build our infrastructure in our ecosystem. If Aaron joins late, he's a pro. He'll figure it out. But Pittsburgh's not going to sit around and wait for Aaron until July. So it's nothing against McCarthy and Aaron, but I don't think Aaron's coming back. And I think Minnesota, who could let him kind of hop on board in July, could work. Yeah. Couldn't it? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I could wrap my head around that. I just remember last year where Aaron said he wasn't going to hold anybody up, and then we didn't get an answer until, what was it, like April? I think it was right before the draft, right? He had whispered to people, to Mike Tomlin, to Arthur Smith, that he was coming. And they knew, which is why they stood still at the position and they didn't really do anything. And so, I'm with you in that, the Vikings have the insurance of JJ McCarthy and the roster. I don't know. I know the Steelers like Will Howard. I don't think they like him to the level where it's like, we're not going to do anything else at quarterback. And then if you are going to wait for him, the problem is then all that quarterback movement that happens in the middle of March. You could be left with, everybody's got their seat, in the game of musical chairs, and you're left with nothing. So, I do think that they would like to have an answer. I do think that that mid-March timeline is important for them. Here's the other thing that I think is sort of interesting when it comes to all of this too. I don't think Art Rooney wants to be bad this year. I don't think he wants to bottom out. Right. I think if that was what they were looking to do, if they were looking to go through the hard reset that you and I have talked about a few times with Pittsburgh, they probably would have gone with Chris Shula or one of the younger guys. I think bringing in Mike McCarthy as the head coach tells you, implicitly that they do not want to go through the full rebuild all at once, go be bad for a couple of years and draft a quarterback. And so if that's the mindset there, then it would be awfully risky to let that mid-March period of player movement go without doing anything at quarterback and without having an answer from Aaron.
Well, if that scenario actually plays out, then it's highly probable that Aaron Rodgers will not be available for the Minnesota Vikings. Colin Cowherd is suggesting that he believes Rodgers ends up in Minnesota, and I honestly don't know if he's just floating that as a hypothetical or if there's actually some substance behind it, something he's hearing from sources. I know we went through this entire back and forth last season. I had this whole back and forth with the Minnesota Vikings fan base about the possibility of Aaron Rodgers coming to Minnesota, and they were very angry at the prospect. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. They were all in on JJ McCarthy, and I kept saying that JJ McCarthy is going to have growing pains. This is a win-now roster. It's a tough thing letting Sam Darnold walk, and obviously, of course, the Minnesota Vikings struggled, and so did JJ McCarthy with his injury situation. The thing is, though, if you do bring in an Aaron Rodgers, well, then you're effectively benching JJ McCarthy, right? He was the starter. They went into the season with him as the starter, and then, he got banged up and whatnot. But if you now bring in another quarterback to essentially say, no, you're going to sit for another whole year, and now Aaron's going to be our quarterback, that's a tough one to sell. And if you bring in, say, a Malik Willis, and we're talking about available quarterbacks who might want to land with Kevin O'Connell, realistically, who would be the quarterbacks available? Mac Jones, but you'd actually have to make a move for him. Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, It seems like Kyler Murray is going to end up being cut. I think that's kind of what's being reported. I forget exactly how some of this stuff will unfold, but it seems like if we're talking realistically, you have Kirk Cousins, Malik Willis, and Kyler Murray as the primary options. I don't see the advantage of bringing in Kyler, honestly. I do see the advantage of Malik Willis. But if you bring in a Malik Willis level quarterback, you are pretty much saying, hey, J.J. McCarthy really might not be the guy. J.J. McCarthy really might not be the guy. You're saying that you're willing to go through some of the potential growing pains that bringing in Malik Willis entails, because he's still going to be a young, raw talent that has to be kind of shaped and molded by Kevin O'Connell. If you retread and bring in, say, a Kirk Cousins now or something, that's interesting, because you can kind of still paint the picture and construct a narrative that J.J. McCarthy is still our quarterback of the future, but he's been banged up these first 2 years. We want to get him healthy. We want to continue his development. You know, there are still lots of things that we want to work on with him. So we're going to bring in Kirk Cousins for a 1-year, $8 million contract, whatever the heck it is. And then, we're going to have Kirk, he's going to mentor JJ, and you do the whole veteran mentorship thing. It can be seen as less of, hey, we're benching him, and more of a strategic bridge situation. Aaron Rodgers is different. The reason why I believe it's different with an Aaron Rodgers versus a Kirk Cousins, you could kind of make the same argument with Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is more of like, hey, we're trying to win it right now, and we don't think J.J. McCarthy can do it. Like, I don't know. It's just a weird situation. It's a weird situation that the Minnesota Vikings find themselves in because of what you're dealing with regarding J.J. and the question of whether you've been able to reach a strong conclusion on him. I'll tell you this right now. If you start J.J. McCarthy throughout the course of the season and you're having these struggles and these ups and downs, and Justin Jefferson is vanishing for entire games, like you really, really, really do, you're not at risk for losing the locker room. You straight up lose the locker room. The players will not be patient. They have no patience for it. I've said this again, and I said this about J.J. McCarthy going into last season and the season before that. They're not there for J.J. McCarthy. They're there for themselves. They're the main characters in their own stories. They are not side characters in J.J. McCarthy's story. And so, that's why even Kevin O'Connell said this, and all coaches say this. I owe it to the team to do what's best for the team. It's not what's best for J.J. McCarthy. It's what's best for the team. And what's tricky is that this is where you kind of have to put in the work with J.J. McCarthy to be like, are you developing? What is your footwork looking like? Are you getting better? Are you growing as a quarterback? Because he hasn't been able to be healthy these last 2 seasons. There's no real strong sense of it. Kevin O'Connell himself said this last offseason, saying, I'm pretty much looking at what we're working with right now with JJ. He's pretty much like, I'm in the evaluation process. That's not normal for year 2. Year 1, even if he sat the whole season, you wouldn't have had that because he would have been playing at least in practice and whatnot. So there would have been development. But he lost that. And now he effectively lost that this past year because he was in and out of the lineup with injuries. So it's just such a weird, tough, complicated situation. And of course, with Sam Darnold winning the Super Bowl with Seattle, that puts tremendous pressure on this organization. Not even just Kevin O'Connell, but really the franchise as a whole. Because I've heard some of the counters to that. I heard people say, well, even with Sam Darnold, we weren't winning the Super Bowl because the Seahawks were just better. And it's like, okay, but then the question is, why were the Seahawks better? Why should the Minnesota Vikings have been ahead? The Minnesota Vikings should have been ahead of the Seattle Seahawks based on roster construction and recent history. Why were the Seattle Seahawks able to leapfrog you then? Why? You have the great coach on defense in Brian Flores. You have the great coach on offense in Kevin O'Connell. You got the pieces. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle, but you have Justin Jefferson. You have wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, running back. Like, you got the pieces. If that was the reality, why were they able to get it done and not you? You were legitimately ahead of them over the last few years, going back to the prime Kirk Cousins days, and then even with Sam Darnold in 2024. And this is what I kept pleading with Minnesota Vikings fans last season. Don't just put it on Sam. Don't say we would have won it if it wasn't for Sam in 2024. They tried to put it all on his shoulders and say he just choked. He turned into a pumpkin. That was the problem. And I do not think that was the case. And I said that well before Sam started to ball with the Seattle Seahawks, and won the Super Bowl. I was like, there were offensive line issues and Kevin O'Connell issues in that playoff game. And that doesn't mean that I'm trying to throw Kevin O'Connell out because I'm a major believer in Kevin O'Connell. But that is one of those things that you had to acknowledge. Actually, this reminds me of a take that Nick Wright had about Drake May, which I thought was really kind of a straw man argument because I don't think anyone was arguing this, but he said it would be a major mistake for the Patriots to look at this season, how it ended, because it came out that Drake May had a shoulder issue and whatnot. And he was just like, it would be a major mistake to say, man, we were right there. We could have won if it wasn't for Drake May's shoulder. We would have won it all. He's like, don't have the same mentality that the Broncos had, where their quarterback was knocked out and now they couldn't get to the Super Bowl. And I made the whole argument that I don't think that's the conversation that's surrounding the Patriots. But that was very much essentially the conversation that was surrounding the Minnesota Vikings. Hey, we could have won it all. We would have got the #1 seed. We would have beat the Rams, etc., if we just had a better quarterback. And that's why we moved on from Sam Darnold. Because J.J. McCarthy gives us the promise of a better quarterback. And it's like, that wasn't the full story. That wasn't the full story. So now things just became a little bit messier in that regard. And so this is where you kind of have to continue. Even if, and I know there was kind of this whole back and forth of like, who was it? Was it the GM? Is it the owner? Is it Kevin O'Connell? Like, who wanted to get rid of Sam? This, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. This is still where you trust Kevin O'Connell, where you say, is J.J. McCarthy the guy? Do we go out and get Malik Willis? Is there value in bringing in a Kirk Cousins or an Aaron Rodgers? You know, like, what do we do here? And if he fails at that again, then from an ownership perspective, you have to reach the conclusion. Hey, is Kevin O'Connell an awesome coach, an awesome offensive coach, and a legitimate quarterback whisperer, but the dude has no idea how to evaluate talent? He just can't. He just can't. And so we need to just not rely on him to make those decisions. We've done that now multiple times, and he's failed spectacularly. We have to remove that aspect of what we rely on him for. But I still think you give him another bite of that apple, honestly. So, yeah, the Vikings find themselves in another weird kind of limbo, purgatory type moment in this offseason. And I don't know what the right answer is because I don't know how confident or how much lack of confidence you could have around a J.J. McCarthy. That's why I'm like, Kevin, what is the conclusion you're drawing here? What are your thoughts? What are you feeling right now? I don't care that we drafted him. I don't care about that. I don't care. It's like, what is the actual football evaluation? That's what you need to get to the bottom of. Not, well, we want to be able to build a team around this and that. Not, well, what if Aaron's only for 1 year in this? It's like, no, I just need to know what is the actual football evaluation. And I think it's really hard for us on the outside looking in to really have a strong sense of that right now. I do. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Minnesota Vikings? Colin Cowherd wanting them to sign Aaron Rodgers? I mean, that seems to be what he's pushing for. Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.